Hello, thank you for having me.
Really excited to have you here. We've been connected for many years now. You originally first came and spoke at the Evolve Network in Chelmsford. Wow, must have been maybe 2017, maybe, or 2016, maybe even. But long time ago, and we've connected on a number of times since. And the work that you do and what you've been doing with Genius in 21 days is phenomenal. It really is exciting. So. Um, let's just talk, because when I first come across you and Genius in 21 days, I was sort of understanding it was very memory focused, whereas for you it's not just memory, is it? It's just learning and accelerated learning. So yeah, please tell us a little bit more about that then.
Sure, yes, we did connect many years ago, and since then the course has already evolved a lot because that's part of our philosophy to always improve month by month, day by day.
Mm.
And when you talk about learning, I think that that's the main thing that we do. So understanding not just how to improve your memory, but the whole learning process. But the reason is that very often people identify learning with memory because that's kind of the final expression of what you've learned.
Mm.
But as we may be, I mean, as we may know, memory is not enough. So very often people believe that their retention depends on their memory, but there's actually a lot more behind that. And it cannot just be restricted to memory if we really want to be efficient and use our mind at our best.
And I'm really looking forward to getting stuck into some really practical things around that. But let's just start with the theory first of all. So you've already alluded to the fact that in order to learn, memory is a component of that learning. So what are some of the other components? Maybe some of the ones that we don't think about, but are fundamental to it. And how can we start to improve those?
Yes. So if we want to think about the whole learning process, I like to use what I call the PRIME method. So PRIME is an acronym that stands for the 5 phases of learning that we need to go through if we want to really have a complete learning method. And M is the memory phase, but as you see, it's 1 out of 5.
Yeah.
So if you imagine you are holding a book in your hands, what happens that some people don't even open that book. So people want to learn something. Some people want to learn a language. Maybe it's in their New Year's resolutions. Maybe they really want to read more. They want to read some personal development books or some industry books, but they never get even to the point in which they open the book. And that's because the first phase is very important, and that's preparation. So preparation means getting into the mindset in order to actually open the book, working on the beliefs so that you have about yourself in terms of your ability to learn as effectively as you want, but also organizing your time in order to do that, because everyone is very busy all the time. And so learning is one of those things that usually doesn't have a deadline. And so not being urgent, people tend to just postpone it. And that's why it's important to work on the preparation phase very well in order to work on the motivation, on the mindset, work on the time organization, and also on the strategy. So learning which kind of strategy to adopt in order to study and approach that kind of piece of information. At that point, yes, if you have a question.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's really interesting you bring up the preparation piece, because obviously in a lot of the work that I do, we talk about assumptions and identifying assumptions that people make. And there was an assumption that I made for years, and it was a story that I would literally tell myself over and over again, which is, I'm terrible at remembering things. So I would say, I'm terrible at remembering that. I'm terrible at remembering that. And I would say it over and over again. Yeah, it was maybe once true. But for as long as I keep saying that, it's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So what you're saying, even part of that preparation is just opening your mind up to the possibility that things could be done in a different way, and that you could start to learn things and you could improve learning quicker and better. And I think that's so vital. And one of the reasons why I really wanted to get you on the show is I made a decision last year that I need to up my learning ability. Now, I learn daily, right? And I'm always trying to learn things. But what I really wanted to up was my recall, because there's so much we absorb. But if I can't bring it back when I need it, then it's almost like, what's the point? You know, it's great having it in the moment, but to be able to have it in the future. And one of the things was, for me, was that I used to say I'm terrible at remembering things. So not only would I say So I would have that. So I'm terrible at remembering things, and then, well, no wonder I'm not remembering it. But I think that, yeah, it's an obvious one, isn't it, when we think about preparation, but so vital.
Yes, and I think that you really hit the point. There are several assumptions that we make in terms of learning, and there's three that I think are very dangerous and that we need to understand how to work through. So the first one is that school will teach us how to learn. And so a lot of people think, if I didn't learn it at school, I mean, it's late for me because the school will teach me how to learn. But actually, if you think about it, the education system is very geared towards teaching you what to learn. So you have teachers explaining concepts, subjects, and so on, but no one, or very, very few enlightened teachers really spend time teaching you how to actually learn. And so it's okay if you don't know the right way. It's okay if you feel you're terrible, because it's not your fault. No one has ever really taken the time and the effort to teach you how you are supposed to learn. And this is very, very important to keep in mind, because otherwise we will believe, oh, I have a bad memory. I am terrible at remembering things, at recalling things. I'm a slow reader. I don't understand things. But that's just because school has not taught us to us. So that's the first one that we need to pay attention to. And another one that's very, very important is a lot of people believe that your results in terms of learning and understanding depend on your intelligence. And when I say this, a lot of people nod and they're like, yeah, true. I mean, they depend on how clever I am. But reality is that every one of us is wired in a different way in terms of learning. So we all have certain predispositions that are different from others. So we all apply automatically, and we have developed throughout the years different learning styles, cognitive styles, thinking styles, and all of them together create our unique cognitive profile. So the reason why some people struggle to understand concepts, to remember concepts, details, is because they don't really know what their cognitive profile is. And so they keep applying what they think they are solutions, but they're actually increasing the problem. So for example, some people may struggle to remember things. And so they say, listen, I'm going to be even more dedicated. I'm going to repeat even more. I'm going to repeat it aloud. I'm going to rewrite it. I'm going to reread it. But actually these solutions or attempted solutions are part of the problem, because they are not going to help you to remember better, and they're going to increase your belief that you're not good, because you will be like, okay, I put even all this effort and I still don't remember things. So I really must be the problem. But reality is that we just work in a different way. We have a different cognitive profile, and it is important to understand what your cognitive profile is in order to be able to work through it and learn in a way that's more natural for you. And for everyone, it's different.
So how does someone identify their cognitive profile?
So the first thing that we do at the course is that. So the first one, we ask you what your goals are. But after that, the second step is to identify your cognitive profile, because there is at least 192 combinations of different profiles that you can have that we analyze. And I say at least because then according to the cases, we may analyze a few things extra. But if you think about this, 192 combinations means that really probably you've been learning wrong the whole time, and your lack of results comes from that. So we analyze it through a series of assessment tests that are not really, they're not meant to assess if you're good or bad. They're meant to just to assess what your preferences are.
They provide data.
Exactly. And from that data, our mentors will prepare a unique plan that's based on your profile. So it's a unique plan that works for you and that is going to be different from anyone else's plan.
I find that fascinating. So there's 192 that you've found learning cognitive profiles, and most of us are taught one way of learning, right? Which means you've got just over 0.5% likelihood that the way that we're being taught is what's best for you. So no wonder there's so many people going around. I think it was Einstein that quoted, if you judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree, it will live its life thinking it's stupid. So it's that whole. And
I love that quote, because it's so true. And unfortunately, the school system has judged us based on that one possibility of learning, and that really favors certain thinking styles, cognitive styles over others. So if you happen to be on the lucky side, then you will build amazing beliefs about yourself as a learner, because all your life you were amazing. But then maybe that doesn't work in your actual life after school, because at times you see there are people that are overachievers at school and they have amazing beliefs about themselves, but then they go into the world, and what worked at school doesn't work in the profession that they've chosen, because maybe that profession requires them to adapt and to learn other possibilities. And on the other side, you have people that are on the unlucky side, and so their profile happens to be on the wrong side, on the one that's not really favored by the school system. And so maybe they spend their life thinking, wait, I'm a slow learner, I am not that smart, I'm struggling. And maybe they put aside certain dreams that they had for themselves just because they think that they are not able to achieve them. And that's very sad, because I believe that with the right method and a tailored method, you can really understand how to apply the right strategy for you. And if you want it badly enough, the dream can become true. But of course, if you don't have the strategy, you just set yourself for failure and frustration. And so it's really a delicate matter.
Yeah, for sure. So P is preparation, and there's obviously 4 elements of that. So what's the next part of prime?
Yes, and so I mentioned the third, so the 3 beliefs. The third one is related to prime, so we'll go back to that, because the third belief is that your retention depends on your memory. So how able you are to recall things depends on your memory, but actually, how able you are to recall things depends on all the 5 phases of the prime method. So we've tackled preparation, and then we can move on to R. And R stands for reading. So once you're ready, you open your book and you need to read. And the way you read is very important, because we make certain mistakes while reading that prevent us from being as fast as we can, and to understand as much as we could. So I'm not a fan of speed reading in itself, because it's very controversial matter, okay? So there's a lot of research that shows that you can only go up to a certain level, but what matters is not really speed reading, but strategic reading. So being able to read strategically, being able to read and absorb as much as you can according to the goal that you have for that kind of text. A mistake that a lot of people make is that they just read everything in the same way, always. So whether it is an email, a novel, an article, or a poem, they just go there and they start reading. But actually, every text is meant to be approached in a different way. And in the moment in which you increase your speed, because you can increase your reading speed, but you also have a strategic approach, then you can really break some barriers that you had in terms of how much you could read. And you can go fast, but without giving up on understanding. Because I'm not a fan of those people who say, I read 5,000 words per minute. And then you ask them, okay, how much do you remember? Yeah, I know that it was about someone that was doing something. No, I mean, you need to know and understand and go in depth. But according to the text, you will need to go more in depth or less. So using a strategic approach that, again, is tailored according to your cognitive profile is very, very important.
I find myself doing that in general anyway. You know, there'll be certain articles there, some pages I can kind of skim read through, and there's other things I'm like, I really want to know this. I noticed that some key words stand out, and I'm like, this is gold here. I need to go back and revisit it. But what I'm really interested in is obviously so much of our learning these days is done that isn't done via reading. Obviously, reading is one form of, well, one sense of 5 which we have. Obviously, auditory and kinesthetic are 2 of the other main senses. But even now, a lot of people will be listening to this in their car, on their run, in the gym, whatever. Some people will be watching this on YouTube. That's not reading. So how do your methods work with people that are just saying things? Are there ways that people can improve their memory and their learning from listening to this or watching this on YouTube?
That's a very, very good question, because, of course, the world is evolving and we're always on the go, and we may listen to something rather than actually sitting down at a desk and studying it. And I'll tell you something, that strategic reading, I remember some time ago, there was someone that took a course with us in Italy, and it's also applicable to blind people. What do I mean? That strategic reading has very little to do with reading. Of course, if you have a text that's written, you will apply in a certain way, but a lot of it is the way you acquire the information. So it's the acquisition phase. And that can be done both on a text, on an online text, on the screen, or listening to something or someone. There's our clients, for example, they choose the means that it's more natural for them, also according to their profile. But then there are some strategies that you can apply if you want to, for example, memorize a podcast. I don't mean memorizing it word by word, because that's completely useless, but recall all the things that you want, being sure that even if you're studying it in the car or in the tube when we will be able to travel again, or on the go, you still don't lose anything. And that's a fear that some people have when they listen to a podcast, for example, because they're like, okay, but it's interesting. I want to remember those things. How do I do that? And it is possible, because a lot of it comes from this reading phase. And when I say reading, I mean acquiring the information in the best way for you. Fine. And that links very well into the third letter.
So reading and really is sort of interchangeable with acquiring information. That's really what we're saying, isn't it? So yes. However you're acquiring that information, this is a process that's relevant, because obviously a lot of learning doesn't just take place from reading it. Okay, cool. Third letter.
Third letter is I, and I stands for internalizing the information. What does it mean? It means that once we've read it, it's not enough. We can't just, at times I ask people, okay, after reading, what's your goal? And some people say recalling, because that's what we've learned, right? But we need to first internalizing. Think about this. I always describe it as an hourglass. Okay, so you have an hourglass, and your words are like the top of the hourglass, and the way the words are phrased, whether you hear them or read them, it's the same thing, is not the way your mind thinks. Our mind doesn't think with syntax, a subject, verb, object in a specific order with certain grammar rules. Our mind thinks with images. It thinks in a quick way, immediate way, simultaneous almost way. So that sentence cannot go through the neck of the hourglass unless you learn how to break it down, unless you learn how to really squeeze the concept in a certain way that makes sense for you, always based on your cognitive profile. And then once it goes through the neck of the hourglass, when you express it, when you talk about it, you will need to recompose the sentence, but using your own words at that point. So internalizing includes 3 micro areas, which are understanding the concepts, processing the information, and reorganizing the information. So you need to understand, and that's where a lot of the work that we've done in the evaluation phases, so when we assess your cognitive profile, comes into place. You need to process it in the best way for you, and you need to reorganize the information in a way that's natural for your brain, because the written world, the spoken word, it's not our natural way to reorganize information. Our mind doesn't think like that. So we need to just make it in a way that's more natural for us.
So I'm just thinking of some scenarios when you're talking about the reorganizing of information. So the one that jumped into my head is, to get into my office, I have 2 keys. I have a silver key and a bronze key, and there's 2 that they go into, and the keys look relatively similar, and really bugged me when I first was coming to this office that I kept putting the wrong key in. I know it's such a mini thing, but when you start your day putting the wrong key in the door, it's just an annoyance. And for me, what I did was I was like, right, well, what is it? And the locks look the same, but the keys are slightly different color. So what I realized was that it was the bronze key that was the bottom lock. So for me, it's like, right, bottom begins with B, so does bronze. That's literally how I've remembered it since, which is I suppose the reorganizing part of the information. It's as I was able to anchor it to something else, which meant that I could have that information readily available as and when I need it.
Definitely. So what did you do first? You had to analyze the information, and so process it, reorganize it. So you had to understand that, okay, wait, they look similar, but the color is different. So by observing and reassessing that, you could reorganize the information. And then at that point, you moved on to the M phase, to the memorizing phase, where you used one characteristic of our memory, which is very, very important. Because after we internalize information, of course, we want to memorize something. At times everything, at times it's just one detail that we need, but we want to memorize something. So in order to do that, there are 4 characteristics of our memory that we need to use, okay? One, we'll use it at times, at other times we won't need it, but all of them are very important. And the first characteristic is that our memory is mostly visual. So it works with images. However, everyone represents those images in a different way. And there again, our cognitive profile comes in. So in the moment in which we use the visual aspect of our memory, we can really make things stick in our mind more. It's like, for example, if I tell you to think about London, what comes to mind immediately? For some people, it will be the Tower Bridge. For some people, it will be the Big Ben or the Queen. But rarely will we find people whose first image is the word London. It can happen, but it's very rare. It's important to understand how your mind represents information in order to memorize effectively. Second characteristic, which is the one that you used to remember the key thing, is that our memory is associative. What does it mean? That it works like a chain. Once you pull the first ring, all the others come as a consequence. And what does it mean? It means that we need, in order to remember something, we need to associate it to something that we already know. In this case, what you already knew was that bottom starts with B, and you decided to associate that bronze was bottom because they are similar, and like this, you don't forget it. So, of course, in certain cases, we're lucky. If the key had been yellow, maybe we would have needed to find another association. But finding associations is very important, and learning how to find associations also where there are no associations that are evident and obvious is a very, very important skill. And third characteristic is that our memory is emotion-based. So when there is an emotion involved, it's easier to remember things. So for example, if I asked you what you ate for dinner 1 month ago, maybe you wouldn't know what to say.
Probably pizza.
Unless you always eat the same thing, exactly. As an Italian, I would say pasta or pizza, probably.
Yeah.
But if 1 month ago you had dinner with your favorite actor or with your idol, probably you would be able to recall the evening better, but also the conversation, also every detail about that evening, because it was something that was out of the ordinary, something that really stuck with you. So we can't have dinner with our favorite idol every day, but and it wouldn't be extraordinary anymore. But in the moment in which we find ways to make whatever we are learning a bit out of the ordinary, making it a bit special through several emotions that we can use. It could be something funny, it could be disgusting, it could be scary. In that moment, then what happens? That our mind creates a stronger connection and says, this thing matters, this thing is different. And it is important because think about this. In the book Psycho-Cybernetics, Maxwell Maltz talks about the fact that for our mind, it is impossible to distinguish an experience that we have imagined vividly from an experience that we have experienced for real. Example, when you dream, okay? Imagine you're dreaming and you dream that you're in a forest and there's a wolf following you. And so you start running and you hear the wolf howling and you run. And then you stumble on a root, you turn around, the wolf is jumping on you and you wake up usually, okay? And at that point, when you wake up, are you relaxed and calm and serene? Usually not, okay? Some people even check under the bed to make sure that the wolf is not there, right? But why? Because your mind experienced that scene as a real one. It wasn't able to distinguish whether it was real or not. And so your body reacted with the same signals that it would have in the moment in which there was an actual wolf. So maybe your heart is beating faster, maybe your hands are sweaty, you're scared, you're short of breath. So we can recreate that also without dreaming. So getting to a focused state that allows you to imagine things so vividly that for your mind, they will feel like real. And why is that important? Because if I asked you to repeat what you've read on a book versus tell me what happened in your favorite holiday 5 years ago, it's probably easier to tell me what happened on your favorite holiday 5 years ago, even if the book was read last week. because when something is experienced for real, it just sticks more.
A couple of things that you've mentioned there. That, I mean, first of all, Psycho-Cybernetics, Dr. Maxwell Maltz, one of my top favorite books. I highly recommend everybody puts it on their read list if they've not read it. But that exercise of heightening those emotions, you said, sort of funny, scary, but having those things that are just absolutely ridiculous as well, you know, of having those scenarios makes it really, really vivid, so you can keep that picture in your mind and be very, very aware of that. So yeah, really, really interesting to be aware of in the association thing. I like I said, the other year I decided, right, well, I learned so much, I need to improve my learning to mean that I'm able to recall more. So I did a lot of reading by the likes of, and there's a great book called Moonwalking with Einstein with Joshua Four. I'm not sure if you've read it.
Yeah.
And sort of really getting a good understanding of sort of the memory palace and what you've just spoken there about, sort of using those tools to get people really, really sort of anchor those images in their mind so they can recall it. So yeah, really, really interesting.
Yes, and you mentioned the memory palace, and that's very connected actually to the fourth characteristic that as I mentioned, there were four, which is that our mind finds it very easy to remember spaces, places, but that's for evolutionary purposes, because we had to remember where we came from, where we were going, and so on. So it's very easy to use the memory palace for most people, because it just uses something that's already in us, which is the ability to remember places without any difficulty usually. So using that is very, very effective in a lot of situations. Then of course we need to know how to adapt the memory palace to the situation, but it's very, very effective.
For people that maybe aren't familiar with what a memory palace is, can you just I was going to say, do you remember the history? But I'm sure you almost definitely remember it. It's your zone of genius, right? About sort of from a few thousand years ago, how it come about, and how people can use it. And if we could touch on that briefly, because I think it is a powerful technique that you teach. And yeah, I'd love for people to know about it.
Of course, the memory palace, some people know it because of Sherlock, because during the TV series, they show how Sherlock Holmes uses the memory palace, but it's not very clear from there. So it's a technique that is actually, they say, the oldest memory technique, at least the oldest that we have track of. And it was very, very used by Cicero in all his speeches, that he would go on for hours and hours talking, knowing the speech word by word and without any note. And so he was very famous for that. And so it was reported which technique he was using, and he was using the memory palace. The story behind the memory palace is that when in ancient Greece, there was this party, we can say, where a lot of guests were invited, and there was a person who had this amazing memory. And so what happened, that unfortunately, during the party, a huge fire burnt everything. And so almost everyone was dead. And they were able to recognize the bodies based on where they were sitting, thanks to this person that was able to just recognize from the place where everyone was, who was who. And this is really the root of the memory palace. So if you think about the room where you are, if you think about your house, also if you are not there, you can easily think about how, you can easily describe it to someone. You can easily think about how it is shaped, where there is a space, another, what furniture there is here or there. And you are probably able to do it with a lot of the places where you've lived, or that you have at least spent some time in. So it could, I don't know, your gym or your office place, or even maybe your childhood home and so on. And so using this in different ways, because of course this is a macro kind of container, but then the technique they use inside the memory palace also makes a difference. Using this, you can really memorize anything much easier. For example, I found a course for Mandarin that I love, because it's called Mandarin Blueprint. And I love it because it uses memory techniques to teach Mandarin. So for me, it's like the perfect combination, because these guys are amazing. And they use the memory palace in order to teach you how to memorize all the different Chinese words that are many, and very often they sound the same, right? Or, for example, you can use it in order to memorize the speeches by walking, let's say, through your house and thinking, okay, what is here, what is there, what is there. And the more you apply the other three characteristics that I mentioned, the easier it will be also to apply the memory palace. The mistake that some people make is that they apply the memory palace just imagining things in that place. And at times it's fine, at times it is enough, but when you're memorizing a lot of things, that may get confusing. So by using also the fact that your memory is visual, it's associative and emotion based, then you can have a very, very effective memory palace that you can use very, very well. One of the things that our clients do after a month from the beginning of the course is to hold a 10-15 minute speech, memorize the word by word, like a famous speech that they choose and select. And they memorize it word by word, and they just hold it in front of everyone. And it is very, very powerful because you see how precise they can be just by using the memory palace very, very effectively. Of course, one thing is to memorize one detail. One thing is to memorize a 15-minute speech word for word. And it's an exercise that, well, for people is very important because, you know, all those beliefs that we said that you built about being slow, about not being able to, when you have big references, they're knackered. They're just swept away. And it's also very amazing to watch because it's one of the examples of what your mind can do when you just teach the right strategy.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I know I took you sort of off course of prime a little bit there, but I thought it was important to bring it up there and talk about memory palace. So thank you for that.
No worries. And then there's the last phase, because it's a very important phase after memory, which is E, the word prime, and it stands for expression. So what happens that a lot of people know things, but you also need to be able to share your knowledge. And this means, on one side, talking in public. If you need to have a presentation or a pitch, it's not enough that you know what you want to say, you need to be able to transfer it. Or maybe you're sitting an exam, you're having a job interview. So being able to perform also when you are under stress, because our mind, when we are under stress, it seems like all the things that you knew 10 minutes before and then you remember 10 minutes after, in that moment, they're just kind of blurry. And so it's important to be able to just perform well. Otherwise, our knowledge will be useless. Most people don't just memorize things because they want to know them, but because they want to use them. If you're learning a language, you don't just need to learn all the words and the grammar rules, but you want to speak the language. If you are preparing for an exam, you want to have a high grade, a high mark for that exam, that shows how prepared you are. So a lot of people get nervous, and it's normal because, you know, we've always been associated to tests in a very bad way. So at school, a test is the moment in which people judge if you are good enough or not. And that creates a very heavy atmosphere every time you need to be tested, because it's like, okay, now I need to show that I am good enough. And it's not easy for most people. So learning how to use the best strategies in order to feel that you can perform at your best in that moment, it helps a lot, because it showcases basically how prepared you are rather than how scared you are.
Yeah, no, very good. I just want to ask you a question, which I'm sure you've given me the answer before, but no doubt it's changed since. How many languages do you speak?
So I speak Italian very, very well. Okay, I speak English, French, Spanish, and Chinese. And
so
yes.
Sorry, the reason I asked that question, so I remember it being quite a few different languages, and obviously Chinese is a very different language to learn. I mean, some people say if you're European, and obviously a lot of people learn English, then it's easy to learn French and Spanish and things. But I mean, I don't know if that's true or not. But you really are walking your talk in terms of being able to do things like that, to be able to speak 5 languages, and it's incredible. But you've already mentioned some of the other ways, the really practical ways to apply some of this thinking. So obviously with speeches, or this methodology, speaking with tests, when people when they've got qualifications. What are some other great ways that people can implement, and how they can, by improving their memory, they can benefit, and things that they can use improving their memory to benefit them?
Sure. I'll tell you something. I took the course when I was 18. Okay. So I was a student at the time and I applied it for studying and it was amazing. But if I have to be honest, now as a business owner, I'm applying it even more. And not necessarily only for memory, but because of the whole process. So the way you process the information in your business makes a huge difference in the way you run your business, in the way you hold meetings, in the way you help your team, in the way you communicate with your team, in the way you research and you constantly innovate. Creativity is a very important aspect of the course as well. And in the moment in which you want to innovate, you have to access your mind, your resources. So I think that our mind is that tool that we use every single day, whatever we do. And we can choose whether to use a very uh, outdated tool or whether to keep it constantly updated. And really, that allows you to stand out and to also I was talking with one of our clients who took the course a few months ago, and he works in banking, and he has a lot of people to manage and a lot of work to do. And he was saying that one of the unexpected benefits, it's not the main reason why he took the course, but it was just so important for him when he noticed it, is that usually in a lot of environments, you have meetings and meetings have a certain time, like half an hour, 1 hour, depends on the meeting. And very often people just drag concepts. They finish the meeting saying, okay, we'll need to set another meeting to follow up with this. And after the course, he was able to organize his thought process so well that all his meetings ended and there was no need for a follow-up. And that saved a lot of time to a lot of people. And actually, he finished his year with an outstanding review. And that was amazing for him career-wise, in terms of bonuses, in terms of promotions. And so our mind is really an asset that we have. And we use it regardless of what we are doing. I use it in order to do a lot of things and run a lot of projects at once without feeling that I need to burn out and still having a personal life. Other people use it in order to study better. Other people use it in order to finish working a few hours earlier than before. There's a nurse, for example, that took the course 1.5 years ago, that a couple of months after the course, she was like, wow, I can't believe it. She's a senior nurse, so she does a lot of research, she manages other nurses, so she does a lot of things. And she was like, wow, before I wasn't able to finish my work before 9 p.m. because of all the many things I have to do. After the course, just by organizing my thoughts in a different way, so the I phase, the internalizing phase better, I can finish at 5 and I've done everything. And this has re-given her a life. So the applications can really vary according to what you do, but the mind is the mind. So we always use it.
Absolutely. So for people that have been listening to this now and they're thinking, right, well, this sounds good, but I'm not sort of in a position where I can go and do the full prime method just yet and learn it, but they want to start to improve their memory. What are some top tips for people that listen to this that they could start implementing from the moment they stop listening to this podcast to start improving their learning?
So in terms of memory, I would suggest just to start working on turning everything that you read into an image in your mind. That's something simple, but you will already see a lot of change in that, because in the moment in which you are reading something and you kind of imagine a movie in your mind, even without applying actual techniques, your retention will already go up. Whenever you have some detail that's a bit harder, try to associate it like you well did with the key, but finding something in your memory that you can really link that information to, because otherwise it may be tough. It will just be a piece of information wandering in your brain without, it's like, you know that you have that fork in your house, but you don't know what drawer it is in. And so it's going to be hard to find it. Okay. While in the moment in which you associate it to something, you know what drawer to open. And so in terms of memory, I would suggest you to do that. And, we have a Facebook group that's called the Genius by Choice, that people can join, where I constantly give new tips, new suggestions. So we go and at times we have some live, so you can ask more questions specific to what you need as well. So that's a good way to start as well.
Brilliant. So people can join the Facebook group, and what I'll do is I'll put the link to the Facebook group in the show notes, so people can go and get access to that. And yeah, creating those images. I think so many of us, we underestimate the power of mind. That's what I love about psycho-cybernetics, is that the power of our mind, and particularly visualization, is so powerful. You know, it's one of the main reasons. Like if I was to, this is audio for the majority of people, but you see the Apple logo, instantly you think of numerous things. You think of iPods, iPhones, MacBooks. You might think classy. You might think of Steve Jobs. You might think of sleek design. You might think of I don't know, like all these different things just by looking at that one image, that logo. You might see the Ryanair logo and think some very different things. Long waiting times, frustration, standing in queues. It can bring back some really horrible memories. So we associate so much with images, and I think that in itself is a really, really powerful tip. Is just associate with the images, and something that you've touched on, but I want you to elaborate on it, is that when you're creating these images, you can make these images like crazy, right? You know, and it doesn't just have to be an image. It could be like a moving image, like movie in your mind type thing. But the more crazy you make it, the more likely it's to stick. So what are some things that people could do to make their images stick?
So when you're talking about details that you want to memorize, I would suggest you to use one of these emotions. So funny, which means making something extremely ridiculous, will allow your mind to remember it better. Or something very scary. So remember that whatever you imagine in your mind is not going to happen for real. Okay, so don't be worried about that. But like, you can make something very violent. Violence is one of those things that again, people remember very well. It really sticks. Or you can make something very sexy, and that helps as well. Or you can, for example, make something very disgusting. When something is disgusting, it's another of those emotions that you're like, ugh, and it sticks with you. So of course, some are more pleasant to visualize than others, but at the same time, they all help. And you will see that usually the first association that comes to mind is probably going to be the best one for you. So don't try too hard. Just think, okay, how would I associate this key that's bronze to the bottom floor? Yeah. And it could be through the letter, like you will did, or it could also be through, okay, bronze is the third medal, it's the lowest of, while silver is up. So lowest at the bottom, bronze, and silver is going to be the floor where I work. So there's different ways to associate. The first one that comes to mind will usually be the best one for you.
So you said funny, sexy, disgusting. What was the others?
Violent.
Violent, yeah. So I mean, I was just thinking of like a really useful way just then, as when you first said funny, of something that would be really practical. So let's say you're ordering a takeaway for everybody, right? But you're ordering takeaways and everyone wants different foods. So for me, it was like, well, the sort of thing that I would do is I would think of, if let's say my dad wanted fish and chips, but my brother wanted a burger, I would imagine like the fish eating my dad on the plate, like something just absolutely ridiculous.
Exactly. That's perfect. Or for the burger, something related to your brother.
Using chips as the knife and fork.
That's
like, so that's the fish is eating my dad using chips, and my brother as the burger. I might imagine him. So you said sort of sexy related. So I might imagine with big sort of burgers on his nipples or something, you know, like something really out there. So when I think of my dad at the table and I think my brother at the table, I think, so then when I'm going and doing the order, I can remember those really quickly. So
absolutely. And I'll tell you something, again, the cognitive profile in there has a lot of influence and impact. Okay. So for some people, imagining something like that crazy and that big is the best option. For some other people, it will be easier to just imagine that father starts with like fish, and brother burger. So we always need to
good job I selected those two. So it was like I set
yeah,
that up.
it was an easy one.
Made it easy for you.
But or you can even remember that they're switched, so they kind of switch the order. But that depends a lot on your profile, because, for example, one of the many characteristics that you can have is you can be more of a visual learner or a verbal learner. So this relates to the way you represent things in your mind. And for some people, there are more images. For some others, is more words, sentences. So, for example, the verbal learner will be the one that, when I say London, pictures the word London. Okay. And it's fine. It doesn't mean that if you picture Tower Bridge, you are not verbal, because, of course, the test needs to be a bit more accurate than just one example. But to let you understand that according to the style, also your way of memorizing the information will change.
Love it. Absolutely love it. In terms of, if people want to focus better, read faster, be able to process information more effectively, to be able to essentially memorize anything, whether it's sort of for, like we spoke about, whether it's for speeches, tests, languages, and they want to find out more about you and what you're up to with Genius in 21 days, how can people find you?
So there's the different ways in which you can find according to the channel that you prefer. So, for example, on Instagram, you can find me with my name, Giulia Remondino, simple, or Genius21 UK, or you can find one of the two and you will move to the other easily, okay, from the bio. Otherwise, on Facebook, I would suggest you to follow our group, to join the group Genius by Choice. I've published a book this in 2020 that's called The Genius by Choice. So you can order that on Amazon to get started on the things that we mentioned. You will find a lot of techniques. So in a book, it's impossible to do all the different 192 profiles. So maybe for a future book, we'll see. But for now, you find all the techniques that you can apply. It doesn't account for your cognitive profile, but there's a lot of content already that you can put in practice. Or on YouTube, if you like videos and YouTube, I have two channels, one for Genius in 21 Days UK, and one is my name, Giulia Remondino, where in my one, I talk a bit more about the mindset that you need, while on Genius in 21 Days, more about the learning aspect of it.
Loads of places where people can.
Yes.
Giulia, thank you so much. It's been really great to have you on the podcast, and I'm sure people have taken some massive value away from this. So please go and connect with Giulia. So I'll put the link to Facebook group in the show notes, and I'll put her website in there as well. So if anyone's interested and want to find out more, then I highly recommend that you connect with Giulia in whichever way, and be able to improve your learning. So Giulia, thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much, Will.
And for everyone that's listening, until next time, make it happen.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Make It Happen with Will Polston podcast. Make sure you join Will's free Facebook group, the Make It Happen community. Please support the show by subscribing on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or Google Play. Share this episode with at least one friend you think would benefit from it, and give Will a 5-star review wherever you download your podcasts. Until next time, make it happen.